Now we begin in Egypt, where President Adli Mansour vowed Thursday to battle for security and stability in his first televised address to the nation since his inauguration. The president's comments come as Islamists promise new protests against his newly installed interim government.
I reaffirm to you all my commitment and the government's commitment to restore security and stability in our country. We will not be scared or alarmed, and we will not go easy on those who kill the innocent. We will fight a battle for security until the end. We will protect the revolution, we will build the nation, and we will move forward without hesitation.
Meanwhile, supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi are calling for more protests to demand his reinstatement. They've refused to recognize the interim leadership, and they say his ousting is, quote, a war against the Islamic nation. CCTV's Adil Marouhi tells us more.
Protests in Egypt are becoming more frequent. 3 so far this week from Morsi's supporters, and bigger ones are planned before the week ends.
We're defending a revolution that has sacrificed a lot of blood to reform Egypt. We were sure that the conspiracy would be huge, but unfortunately, President Morsi did not want to show the power he had in the streets. But we're telling him that we are now here in the streets and will defend Islamic Sharia with our souls.
This is a war against the Islamic nation. President Morsi was elected, so he must be reinstated. Nothing else. We won't recognize Baradei nor the interim Prime Minister Biblawi. All we know is that Morsi is the true president.
Their demands have been well known since Morsi was ousted and detained earlier this month. But the army-backed interim government has dismissed calls from the Muslim Brotherhood for Morsi's reinstatement. And some of the government supporters say there is no room for talks with the Brotherhood.
They are not going back to dealing with them. This is the will of the people, protected by the army. Not just one stream like the Brotherhood. They are escalating in violence, and even in Sinai. Terrorism attacks are rising. We will not be subject to such threats.
Leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood announced that they will step up the protests to peak on July 25th, or Ramadan 17th as they have named it. They've told their supporters that by then, Morsi will be back among them. And the attacks in Sinai will stop within a day of his release. The Muslim Brotherhood's escalation hasn't started yet. However, scores have died in the days since Mohamed Morsi was ousted and many more injured. All this to prove that they remain a potent political force. Adil Mahroui, CCTV, Cairo.
Now for the latest on the political turmoil in Egypt, let's cross to Adil Marouhi, who's live in Cairo. Adil, now President Adli Mansour has warned that the interim government is prepared to fight any threats of insecurity. So does this in any way affect the Muslim Brotherhood's plans for further protests? They said they'll take to the streets later today.
Yes, they are still planning to take the streets. They say that millions will take the streets today to put more pressure on the army and the interim government to reinstate President Mohamed Morsi. To them, they didn't pay much attention to the words of the interim president Adli Mansour, who they described several times before that his position or taking lead of the country is illegitimate, and therefore they call it today the challenge protest, and they want to challenge those who have made the coup in their perspective. There have been several reports that buses are organized to transport their supporters from several governorates all over Egypt down to Rabaa al-Adawiya Square, where they have been sitting in for over 2 weeks now.
Now, Adil, going beyond the situation around these ongoing protests, the Egyptian army has been trying to contain outbreaks of violence by militants, and that's also in the Sinai Peninsula. This week, for instance, we saw 3 policemen killed in that region. Now, is the army making any progress in the Sinai?
Well, there has been a significant progress in protecting the borders. We have seen reports and videos the army tried to, pictures the army tried to broadcast of its efforts to block down or to damage, to ruin all the tunnels within the Sinai borders, the eastern borders, particularly with Gaza. And they seem to be successful in maintaining this progress to shut down all of these tunnels. On the other hand, as you said, at least 3 were killed this week, or in just a few days. Since President Mohamed Morsi was ousted on July 3rd, we've seen a lot of attacks in Sinai, most of them described by the security forces as terrorist attacks. They began since July 5th, and until today we have at least 21 dead. Most of them are from our police officers and army officers. There are few civilians that have been killed, some say by mistake. This happens in a series of about 35 targeted attacks on military headquarters facilities. We've seen once again an explosion on the the natural gas pipeline that supports Israel and Jordan. So the number of incidents are not being controlled, but the army is trying to block down the terrorist cells by shutting down their supply from the borders.
All right, Adil Maroui there live in Cairo. Thanks very much. Now, the West African leaders have wrapped up a 2-day summit in Nigeria, expressing their support for Malian elections set to take place on July 28th. Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara says it's crucial that Mali's presidential election be held as scheduled. This is despite the country's election commission expressing doubts the country will in fact be ready for those elections. Some 500,000 people remain displaced after continuing conflict. Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan has, however, urged foreign donors to help fund Mali's vote. The poll is seen as crucial to reuniting the nation shaken by an 18-month-long political crisis. Meanwhile, the architect of a peace deal between Mali's government and northern separatist rebels has pulled out of this month's presidential elections. It comes after his legal request to have the vote postponed failed. Tebele Drame has complained of French pressure to hold a vote that he says cannot be free and fair so soon after a war to liberate northern Mali from rebels. CCTV's Trevor Mbija has more.
With only 2 weeks left before Malians go to the polls, some seem to have lost confidence in the elections. Former Minister Tebele Drame says that in the rush to organize the vote on time, Mali's own electoral laws have been broken, and so the vote would be illegal. He's now pulled out of the race. France, which sent troops to fight Islamists in northern Mali, has led calls from Western powers for the vote to go ahead on time. Advocacy groups warn, however, that a botched vote risks another crisis. In the meantime, West African leaders are meeting in Nigeria to deliberate on the elections and how to restore the country to a constitutional government.
Our deliberations will highlight the existence of a growing convergence of views on the steps to be taken to deepen dialogue and reconciliation between stakeholders in that country. A definitive resolution of the Malian crisis will undoubtedly encourage our bilateral and multilateral partners to revamp development efforts in Mali.
Diplomats led by UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon have called on candidates to accept the results despite the strong potential for an imperfect electoral process. Two of Mali's main parties have also said they would honor the outcome of the election, even though it was likely to be marred by technical problems. Trevor Mbija, CCTV.
It's time now for a quick break. Africa Live returns just after this.
We follow the latest trends in global politics, economics, culture and sport, and how Africa fits into the global picture. You decide what's important.
We need to trade justice.
Africa's future will be determined by Africa.
For women's equal opportunity, for a better life.
We have to change something, and it's not the outsiders.
Talk Africa, a new voice for the world.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Now in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where hundreds of residents protested in the eastern city of Goma on Thursday against President Joseph Kabila, accusing him of incompetence. They say Kabila has been unable to neutralize rebels who continue to plague the region. This is despite the just relaunched military campaign against M23 rebels. Meanwhile, the United Nations has voiced concerns about recent clashes and alleged ill treatment of captured rebels. Clementine Logan has more.
Heavy fighting between the Congolese army and the M23 rebel group is underway, just 12 kilometers northeast of the city of Goma in the mineral-rich North Kivu province. The clashes, which began on Sunday, ended several weeks of relative calm and revived memories of the attack in November, which saw the Tutsi-led insurgents seize the city. After 4 days of clashes, the front line went quiet as the army managed to push the rebels several kilometers further from the city on Thursday. But the United Nations is now reviewing its support to Democratic Republic of Congo army units, accused of desecrating the corpses of rebels and mistreating detainees. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon said they've raised the reported abuse of M23 rebels with the Congolese army and welcomed steps by the army to investigate the claims and hold the perpetrators to account. Ban Ki-moon also said the UN MONUSCO peacekeeping force and intervention brigade were on high alert and ready to intervene if civilians came under threat from the fighting. The 3,000-strong intervention brigade has a much tougher mandate to take on rebel groups in a bid to end the decades-old conflict in Congo's east, which has claimed the lives of millions. Meanwhile, hundreds of angry residents took to the streets in central Goma. Police fired tear gas to disperse the crowds, who blocked roads and were calling for President Kabila to step down. They accuse him of incompetence in flushing out the rebels who continue to destabilize the region. Adding to uncertainty were rumours that the Kinshasa government was going to replace the military command in Goma. The claims were later denied by government spokesman Lambert Mende, who said they'd been circulated by the M23 rebel group itself. Clementine Logan, CCTV.
The Kenyan military has dismissed claims that it defied a UN ban on exporting Somali charcoal. Charcoal sales are widely thought to have helped finance al-Shabaab fighters. Now, a leaked UN report claims Kenyan forces have helped export charcoal from the port of Kismayo. CCTV's Mohammed Moge has more.
The Kenyan force in the disputed port city of Kismayo is on the spot again, barely 2 weeks after the Somali government accused them of complicity in the raging battle for the control of the port city. Kismayo is central to the Somali charcoal business. But the United Nations Security Council banned charcoal exports 18 months ago. That was to cut off a major source of funding to al-Shabaab. Now UN monitors say Kenyan forces in the city have been helping beat the ban. The Kenya Defense Force has dismissed the claims, saying the monitor's report is not objective. A Somali politician has called for roundtable talks with the UN.
I think there is a mistake here. There was no charcoal that was exported from Kismayo. As for the UN monitors, we are actually telling them to come over and give us your proof. Kenya has nothing to do with it. It has not helped in any export of charcoal and should not be dragged into this.
Kenyan troops took Kismayo, an al-Shabaab stronghold, last September. They entered Somalia in October 2011 following a spate of kidnappings in Kenyan territory. Mohammed Moge, CCTV, Mogadishu.
Now, on Thursday, we saw global celebrations around Nelson Mandela Day. Mandela has made an impact on countless people over the years. For some of his closest friends, the moment they met Mandela remains a vivid memory. Esop Pahad was just a boy, but years later, he became a minister in Mandela's office. He spoke to CCTV's Angelo Coppola.
The Pahad family lived around the corner from Chancellor House in Ferreirastown in Johannesburg, where Mandela operated his legal practice from. The family flat was often used to host political meetings.
So I must have been, 8, 9 years old when Mandela started coming regularly to my parents' flat. And when I think of it, I can remember is this very prominent looking, very handsome, tall man with a very dignified bearing.
Dr. Pahad, your most abiding memory of President Mandela, what was it?
And as we were sitting and waiting in this room, a very tall gentleman walked in, dressed as a night watchman. And that was Mandela. And he then started talking to us about why he's gone in the underground, the ANC had been banned, what they expected from us, the young people, how we needed to continue with the struggle.
It was 27 years later when Pahad would next see the future president of South Africa in a reception line in London, while Mandela was on a world tour.
And as we were standing in the line, I said, I'm Yusuf Pahad, and he said, and how's Ghulam? That's my father. There can be no Mandela, there can be no Tambo, there can't be anybody if you do not have the masses of the people.
There's no question that the man was made by the movement, and there's no question that his impact has been immense in South Africa and in the world. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in downtown Johannesburg.